The frozen body of a woman lay crumpled in the snowdrift like a discarded rag doll, and Kyle Jameson knew that if he did not act within the next few minutes, she would die just yards from his horse's hooves. He had been riding back to his ranch outside Cripple Creek, Colorado, after delivering a herd of cattle to the railhead in Colorado Springs, when the blizzard hit with a vengeance that caught even this experienced rancher off guard. The wind howled across the mountain pass like a banshee, and the snow fell so thick he could barely see his gelding's ears, but something had made him look to the right at just that moment. Some instinct that told him to search the white landscape for anything out of place. Kyle dismounted quickly, his boots sinking into snow that reached past his knees. He was a tall man of 27 years, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of strong coffee. His hands were calloused and rough as he reached for the woman, brushing snow from her face to reveal pale skin tinged blue with cold. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and spread across the snow like spilled wine. But what made his breath catch in his throat was the unmistakable swell of her belly beneath her thin traveling cloak. "Madam," he called, patting her cheek gently. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of summer leaves, a startling green that seemed too vibrant for this frozen landscape. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Kyle did not waste time with more questions. He shrugged out of his heavy sheepskin coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted her as carefully as he could. She was lighter than he expected, too light for a woman carrying a child, and he wondered how long she had been without proper food. His gelding, a steady animal named Rusty, stood patient as Kyle managed to mount while holding the woman, settling her across his lap with her head against his chest. The ride back to his ranch took nearly an hour, every minute of it torture as he felt the woman's shallow breathing against his shirt and prayed he was not too late. The storm seemed to rage harder, as if nature itself wanted to claim this woman's life. But Kyle had learned long ago to be stubborn in the face of adversity. His ranch house finally appeared through the white curtain of snow, a sturdy two-story structure built of logs and stone that his father had constructed 20 years earlier. Smoke rose from the chimney, which meant his housekeeper Martha had kept the fires burning. Kyle kicked the door open and carried the woman inside, shouting for Martha as he went. The older woman appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. "Sweet mercy," Martha breathed. "Where did you find her?" "On the pass road." "Get blankets and heat water. She is nearly frozen through, and she is carrying a child." Martha, who had been housekeeper at the Jameson Ranch for 15 years and had helped raise Kyle after his mother's death, moved with efficient speed. Within minutes, they had the woman stripped of her wet clothes and wrapped in warm blankets near the parlor fireplace. Kyle had stepped out to give her privacy during the undressing, but now he knelt beside the sofa where they had laid her, watching as Martha rubbed the woman's hands and feet to restore circulation. "Is she going to live?" Kyle asked, surprised by the tightness in his own voice. "Too soon to tell," Martha said. "But you got to her in time, I think. Another hour and we would be planning a funeral instead of a rescue. Did you see any sign of a husband, a wagon, anything?" Kyle shook his head. "Nothing but her in the snow. I'll go back out when the storm breaks and search, but in this weather, tracks will be covered within minutes." The woman stirred, a small moan escaping her lips. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding them as she looked around the unfamiliar room. When her gaze landed on Kyle, she flinched, trying to pull away. "Easy now," Kyle said softly, holding up his hands. "You are safe. I found you on the pass road, nearly frozen. This is my ranch and this is Martha, my housekeeper. We mean you no harm." The woman's hand moved instinctively to her swollen belly, as if reassuring herself that the child was still there. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "The Jameson Ranch, about 5 miles outside Cripple Creek." "I am Kyle Jameson, and you are welcome to stay as long as you need." Tears welled in those green eyes, spilling over to track down her pale cheeks. "I thought I was going to die. I thought my baby was going to die." Martha handed her a cup of warm broth, helping her sit up enough to drink. "Well, you are not dead yet, and neither is that baby, so let us focus on keeping it that way. What is your name, child?" "Laura Thompson." She took a sip of the broth, then another, as if suddenly realizing how hungry she was. "I was traveling from Denver to meet my sister in Cripple Creek, but the stagecoach driver said the storm was too dangerous. He let me off at a way station and said he would return when it passed, but I could not wait. My sister is all I have left, and I was afraid if I did not reach her soon." Her voice broke, and she took a shaky breath. "The man at the way station said it was only a few miles. He said I could walk it easily, but the storm came so fast and I lost the road." Kyle felt anger rise in his chest at the thought of someone sending a pregnant woman out into a blizzard on foot, but he kept his voice calm. "You are here now and you are safe. That is what matters. You should rest," Martha said firmly. "You have been through an ordeal, and you need to think of that baby. We will send word to your sister once the storm passes." Laura nodded, her eyes already drooping with exhaustion. Within minutes, she had fallen into a deep sleep, her breathing more regular now that warmth had returned to her body. Kyle stood and moved to the window, staring out at the raging storm. Martha came to stand beside him, her shrewd eyes studying his profile. "You did a good thing today," she said quietly. "Any man would have done the same. Any decent man, perhaps, but there are not as many of those as there should be." She paused, then added, "She is in trouble, that girl, a woman in her condition, traveling alone with no husband in sight. There is a story there, and I suspect it is not a happy one." Kyle had already drawn the same conclusion. In 1892 Colorado, a pregnant woman without a husband faced harsh judgment and limited options. Whatever had brought Laura Thompson to this point, it had been born of desperation. "She can stay here as long as she needs," Kyle heard himself say. "Until after the baby comes, if necessary. We have the room, and it would be wrong to turn her out in her condition." Martha smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "Your father would be proud of you. He always did raise you to be a gentleman." The storm raged for 3 days, trapping them all inside the ranch house. During that time, Kyle learned more about Laura Thompson, though she was careful about certain details. She had been born in Missouri, she said, and had come west after her parents died of influenza the previous year. She spoke little of the baby's father, except to say that he was gone and would not be coming back. The pain in her eyes when she said this told Kyle not to press for more information. For her part, Laura seemed overwhelmed by the kindness shown to her. She had expected judgment, even cruelty, but instead found herself treated as an honored guest in the Jameson household. Kyle was unfailingly polite, giving her space but checking on her regularly to ensure she had everything she needed. Martha clucked over her like a mother hen, insisting she eat regular meals and rest as much as possible. On the third evening, as the storm finally began to ease, Laura found Kyle in his study, going over the ranch accounts by lamplight. She knocked softly on the doorframe and he looked up, gesturing for her to enter. "I wanted to thank you," she said, standing awkwardly in the doorway, "for saving my life and for your hospitality. Once the roads are clear, I will go to my sister and be out of your way." Kyle set down his pen and regarded her seriously. "You are not in my way, Miss Thompson, but I have been thinking about your situation and I have a proposition for you." Laura's expression became guarded. "What kind of proposition?" "Nothing improper," Kyle said quickly. "I am not that sort of man, but the truth is, a woman in your condition is going to face considerable difficulty, even with a sister to help her. People talk and they judge, and they make life hard for those they feel have stepped outside proper society. I have this ranch, a good home, and the respect of the community. If you were to stay here, under my protection, things would be easier for you and for your child." "I do not understand what you are suggesting." Kyle stood and moved around the desk, keeping a respectful distance. "Stay here. Raise your baby in this home with the resources and protection I can provide. You would have your own room, your freedom, and no expectations beyond helping Martha with some of the household tasks when you are able. In return, your child would grow up with a roof over its head, food in its belly, and a name that is respected in this territory." Laura stared at him as if he had suddenly sprouted a second head. "But why would you do this? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." "Because it is the right thing to do," Kyle said simply, "and because this ranch is too big and too empty for just Martha and me." A child's laughter would be a welcome sound in these halls. "People will talk," Laura whispered. "They will assume things about us. Let them assume. Anyone who knows me knows I am not a man who takes advantage of women in difficult circumstances. And if it bothers you that much, we could always tell people we are cousins, that you came west to help me run the household." Laura's hand went to her belly again, that protective gesture Kyle had seen her make 100 times in the past 3 days. "I cannot pay you. I have almost no money." "I am not asking for payment. I am offering you a home, Miss Thompson. You can raise that baby here, safe and warm and provided for. That is all I am offering, and all I am asking in return is that you accept it." Tears filled her eyes again, and this time she did not bother to blink them away. "I do not deserve such kindness. Everyone deserves kindness, especially when they are at their lowest point. What do you say?" Laura was quiet for a long moment, and Kyle could see the war playing out behind her eyes. Pride fought with practicality, hope wrestled with fear. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I will stay. But only until I can find a way to support myself and my child. I will not be a burden on you forever." "You are not a burden," Kyle said firmly. "You will raise that baby in my home, and that is the end of it." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Kyle rode into Cripple Creek to send a telegram to Laura's sister, informing her that Laura was safe and staying at the Jameson Ranch. The response came back within hours. Laura's sister had fallen ill with pneumonia and was currently in the hospital in Pueblo. She would not be able to take Laura in for several months, if at all. When Kyle returned to the ranch with this news, he found Laura helping Martha in the kitchen, rolling out pie dough with flour dusting her nose. The domestic scene struck him in a way he had not expected, creating a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the heat from the cook stove. "Your sister is ill," he said gently, explaining the situation. "But you have a place here for as long as you need it. That has not changed." Laura's face fell at the news about her sister, but she nodded bravely. "Then I will work to earn my keep. I am a good cook, and I know how to clean and mend. I will not be a freeloader in your house, Mr. Jameson." "Kyle," he corrected. "If you are going to be living under my roof, we should dispense with the formalities, and you are not a freeloader. You are a guest, and when you are recovered, if you wish to help Martha, that is entirely up to you." Over the following weeks, a routine established itself at the Jameson Ranch. Laura's health improved steadily as she ate regular meals and got proper rest. Her belly grew rounder as the baby developed, and Martha estimated she was about 6 months along. Despite Kyle's insistence that she rest, Laura insisted on helping around the house. She had a gift for cooking, creating meals that had even the ranch hands asking for seconds, and she had a way of making the big house feel warmer and more welcoming. Kyle found himself looking forward to coming in from the day's work, knowing Laura would be there. She had a quick mind and a dry sense of humor that emerged once she felt comfortable. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and she would read aloud from books in his father's library while he worked on mending tack or reviewing accounts. It was peaceful in a way his life had not been in years. The people of Cripple Creek gradually learned of the pregnant woman staying at the Jameson Ranch. Kyle had told a select few that she was a distant cousin who had come to help with the household, and most people seemed to accept this explanation. Kyle Jameson was known as an honest man, and his word carried weight in the community. There were a few raised eyebrows and whispered speculations, but nothing that reached Kyle's ears directly. One evening in early March, about 6 weeks after Kyle had found her in the snow, Laura sat across from him at dinner and finally told him the full truth. "His name was Robert," she said quietly, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "Robert Martin. We met in Denver where I was working as a seamstress after my parents died. He was charming and attentive, and he said he loved me. He said we would marry as soon as he made his fortune in the silver mines." She paused, her voice catching. "I believed him. I trusted him. And when I told him about the baby, he left. Just disappeared in the night, taking what little money I had saved. I tried to find him, but it was as if he had never existed. Even the boarding house where he said he lived had no record of him." Kyle felt his jaw tighten with anger at this Robert Martin, whoever he was. "He was a coward and a scoundrel. He was a liar," Laura said bitterly. "And I was a fool to believe him. I thought about trying to pass the baby off as my late husband's child, pretending to be a widow, but I have never been good at lying. When I realized I could not support myself and a baby alone in Denver, I wrote to my sister. She said to come to Cripple Creek, that her husband had a good job in the mines and they would help me. But then the telegram came saying she was ill right before I left, and I did not know what else to do. I had already paid for the stagecoach ticket. I thought if I could just get here, I could figure something out." Tears streamed down her face now. "And then the storm came, and I thought that was it. I thought God was punishing me for my sins." Kyle moved around the table and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Laura, listen to me. You are not being punished. You made a mistake in trusting the wrong man, but that does not make you a bad person. And that baby you are carrying is innocent of all of this. What matters now is that you are both safe, and you are both going to be fine." "But why are you being so kind to me?" Laura asked, searching his face. "You barely know me. Why do you care?" Kyle was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "When I was 12 years old, my mother died giving birth to what would have been my little sister. The baby died too. My father was heartbroken, and for a long time, this house was filled with grief and silence. I remember thinking that if we could have just saved one of them, if the baby had lived, it would have been worth all the pain. Maybe that is why I stopped when I saw you in the snow. Maybe I was given a second chance to save a life that should not be lost." Laura squeezed his hands, a soft smile breaking through her tears. "You are a good man, Kyle Jameson, better than I deserve. You deserve the world, Laura Thompson. And I am going to make sure you and that baby have everything you need." As March gave way to April, something shifted between Kyle and Laura. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable even to them. But Martha, who missed nothing, saw it clearly. She saw how Kyle's eyes followed Laura when she moved through a room. She saw how Laura's face lit up when Kyle came in from the fields. She saw the way they sat closer together in the evenings, the way their hands would brush when passing dishes at dinner, the way they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. One afternoon, while Laura was hanging laundry in the warm spring sunshine, Martha came to stand beside her. "That boy is falling in love with you," Martha said without preamble. Laura nearly dropped the sheet she was hanging. "What? No, he is just being kind. I have known Kyle since he was 12 years old, and I have never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you. And unless I am much mistaken, you feel the same way about him." Laura was quiet for a long moment, her hand stilling on the clothesline. "It does not matter what I feel. I am carrying another man's child. Kyle deserves better than that. Kyle deserves to be happy, and so do you. That baby did not ask to be born into complicated circumstances, but it is going to need a father. And I cannot think of a better man for the job than Kyle Jameson." "He has not said anything to me about his feelings," Laura protested weakly. "Because he is a gentleman, and he does not want to take advantage of your vulnerable position. But mark my words, girl, that man loves you. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" That evening, Kyle asked Laura to walk with him down to the creek that ran through his property. The spring air was warm and sweet, carrying the scent of new grass and wildflowers. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sound of the water and the evening birdsong. "Laura," Kyle said finally, stopping near a large cottonwood tree, "there is something I need to say to you, and I need you to hear me out before you respond." Laura's heart began to pound. "All right. These past 2 months, having you here, have been the happiest of my life. I wake up each morning looking forward to seeing your face at breakfast. I work harder during the day so I can finish earlier and spend the evening with you. When I think about the future, I cannot imagine it without you in it." He took a deep breath. "I know this is complicated. I know you are carrying another man's child, and I know you have every reason to be wary of trusting any man after what happened to you. But I need you to know that I love you, Laura. I love you. And I love that baby you are carrying, and I want to give you both my name." Laura stared at him, her mouth open in shock. "Kyle, I do not know what to say. Say you will marry me. Not because you need my protection or my home, but because you love me too. I see it in your eyes when you look at me. I feel it when we sit together in the evenings. Tell me I am not imagining this connection between us." "You are not imagining it," Laura whispered. "I do love you. I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was just gratitude or dependence, but it is more than that. So much more. But Kyle, I bring so much baggage to this. An illegitimate child, a scandal, a past that could hurt your reputation." "I do not care about any of that," Kyle said fiercely, taking her hands in his. "I care about you. I care about that baby. I want to be the father that child deserves, and I want to be the husband you deserve. Say yes, Laura. Please say yes." Laura felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but for once they were tears of joy rather than despair. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Kyle Jameson." Kyle pulled her into his arms, holding her close, mindful of her pregnant belly between them. He kissed her then, a sweet, tender kiss that held the promise of all the tomorrows they would share together. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. "I will do right by you," Kyle vowed. "I swear it on my life." "I know you will," Laura said softly. "You already have." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony in the Cripple Creek Church, with Martha and a few of Kyle's closest ranch hands as witnesses. Laura wore a dress that Martha had altered to accommodate her growing belly, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Kyle had picked that morning. The reverend who performed the ceremony, was an old friend of Kyle's late father, and asked no uncomfortable questions about the timing of the marriage versus the pregnancy. When Kyle placed the gold band on Laura's finger and kissed her as his wife, Laura felt something inside her that had been broken begin to heal. This was not the marriage she had imagined for herself, but it was real and honest and built on genuine love and respect. The ranch hands threw them a celebration back at the house, with music and dancing and enough food to feed half of Cripple Creek. Laura, tired from the excitement and the weight of her pregnancy, retired early, and Kyle followed soon after. They had agreed to take things slowly, to let their physical relationship develop naturally given Laura's condition and her past trauma. That night, as they lay in Kyle's large bed with Laura curled carefully against his side, she felt safe for the first time in months. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Kyle asked, his hand stroking her hair gently. "For seeing me in that snow, for stopping, for everything that came after." "You are my wife now," Kyle said softly. "You and that baby are my family. I will always stop for you." As April turned to May, Laura bloomed along with the spring flowers. Her belly grew larger, and the baby became more active, kicking and moving constantly. Kyle was fascinated by this, often placing his hand on her stomach to feel the baby's movements. His face would light up with wonder each time, and Laura would feel her heart swell with love for this man who had chosen them. The people of Cripple Creek seemed to accept the marriage easily enough. There was some gossip about the timing, given that Laura's pregnancy was quite obvious by the wedding day, but Kyle's reputation as an honest man helped smooth over most of the whispers. He told anyone who asked that the baby was his, conceived before they were married, and that was why he had been so quick to make Laura his wife. It was easier than the truth, and it protected Laura from judgment. One warm evening in mid-May, while Kyle was working late in the barn, Laura sat with Martha in the kitchen, snapping peas for dinner. "You are happy," Martha observed. "Truly happy." "I am," Laura admitted. "Happier than I ever thought I could be after everything that happened. Kyle is wonderful. He talks to the baby, did you know that? When he thinks I am asleep, he will put his hand on my belly and tell the baby stories about the ranch, about his parents, about the future we are going to have together." Martha smiled warmly. "That boy has more love in him than he knows what to do with. His parents would be so proud of the man he has become. I wish I could have met them. His mother was a lot like you, actually. Strong, kind, with a sharp wit that could make his father laugh even on the hardest days. His father was quiet but steady, the kind of man you could always depend on." Kyle got the best of both of them. Laura felt the baby kick hard, making her wince slightly. Martha noticed immediately, how far apart are those pains coming? They are not pains exactly, just strong movements. The baby has been very active today. Still, you should take it easy. That baby could come any time now. You are, 8 months along? Close to it, I think. It is hard to know exactly. In fact, the baby came 2 weeks later on a warm June morning when the sky was so blue it hurt to look at it. Laura had been hanging laundry when the first real pain hit, strong enough to make her double over. Martha, who had been watching her like a hawk for days, saw it happen and immediately took charge. "Kyle," she bellowed across the yard, "get Dr. Harrison. Now." Kyle, who had been working with one of the horses in the corral, vaulted over the fence and ran to where Laura stood, her face pale and her hands gripping her belly. "Is it time?" he asked, his voice tight with worry. "I think so," Laura gasped as another pain hit. Kyle swept her up in his arms and carried her into the house, taking the stairs 2 at a time to get her to their bedroom. Martha was right behind them, already barking orders about hot water and clean sheets. "I will be back with the doctor in 20 minutes, Kyle promised, laying Laura gently on the bed. He kissed her forehead. "You are strong. You can do this." "Do not leave me," Laura said, gripping his hand. "I have to get the doctor, but I will be back before you know it. Martha is here, and she has helped deliver more babies than anyone in this county. You are in good hands." He was true to his word, returning with Dr. Harrison in less than half an hour. By then, Laura's pains were coming fast and hard, and she was gripping Martha's hand so tightly the older woman would later joke that she nearly broke her fingers. Kyle tried to wait downstairs, as was proper, but when he heard Laura cry out, he could not stop himself from going back up. He burst into the room, ignoring the doctor's protests, and went straight to Laura's side. "I am here," he said, taking her hand. "I am right here." "Sir, this is highly irregular," Dr. Harrison said. "I do not care," Kyle said firmly. "This is my wife, and I am staying." Laura looked up at him through tears of pain and fear. "I am scared. I know. But you are the bravest person I know. You survived a blizzard, you survived heartbreak, you survived so much already. You can survive this too." The labor lasted 6 hours, the longest 6 hours of Kyle's life. He stayed by Laura's side the entire time, letting her squeeze his hand until he thought his bones might break, wiping the sweat from her face, and whispering encouragement even when he was terrified out of his mind. Martha and the doctor worked efficiently, and finally, as the sun was beginning to set, they heard the thin, furious wail of a newborn baby. "It is a boy," Dr. Harrison announced, holding up the squirming, red-faced infant. "A healthy boy with good lungs by the sound of it." Kyle felt tears streaming down his face as he watched the doctor hand the baby to Martha for cleaning. Laura was crying too, exhausted and overwhelmed and flooded with relief. "A boy," she whispered. "We have a son." "You have a son," Kyle corrected gently. Then he paused and looked at her seriously. "Unless you would allow me to claim him as mine, legally and in every way that matters." Laura's eyes filled with fresh tears. "You would do that. I would be honored to do that. I love him already, Laura. He is ours." Martha brought the cleaned and wrapped baby over, placing him carefully in Laura's arms. The infant had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused dark eyes. He had a shock of dark hair and a tiny, perfect face. "He is beautiful," Laura breathed. "He looks like his mother," Kyle said softly, reaching out to stroke one tiny hand. The baby's fingers immediately wrapped around Kyle's finger, gripping with surprising strength. "What should we name him?" Laura asked. Kyle had thought about this. "I would like to name him James, after my father." "James Thomas Jameson, if that is all right with you." Laura looked down at the baby, testing the name in her mind. "James Thomas Jameson, it is perfect. Hello, little James. Welcome to the world." Dr. Harrison finished his examination of both mother and baby and declared them both healthy, though he insisted Laura needed several weeks of rest to recover. Kyle assured him that Laura would have all the rest she needed, and he practically pushed the doctor out the door in his eagerness to get back to his new family. That night, after Martha had finally been persuaded to go to bed, Kyle sat in the rocking chair next to their bed, holding James while Laura slept. The baby was awake, making small snuffling noises and peering around at this strange new world. Kyle looked down at the tiny face and felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly took his breath away. "I promise you," he whispered to the baby, "I will always protect you. I will always provide for you. I will teach you to be a good man, an honest man. I will love you exactly the same as any children your mother and I might have together. You are my son, James, mine and hers, and nothing and no one will ever change that." The baby yawned, a tiny sound that made Kyle smile, then promptly fell asleep in his arms. The next few weeks were an adjustment for everyone in the household. James was a good baby overall, but he still woke several times a night to eat, leaving both Kyle and Laura exhausted. Kyle insisted on helping with the nighttime feedings, bringing the baby to Laura when he needed to nurse, and then walking him around the room until he fell back asleep. During the day, when Kyle was working, Martha would help Laura with the baby, teaching her all the tricks she had learned over years of helping with infants. The ranch hands were delighted by the addition of little James. They would take turns holding him when they came in for meals, these rough, hardened cowboys going soft as butter in the presence of an infant. More than one of them had admitted to Kyle that seeing him with a family had made them think about settling down themselves. One evening in late June, while James was sleeping in his cradle next to their bed, Laura and Kyle finally had a moment alone together. They sat on the porch swing, watching the sun set over the mountains, her head resting on his shoulder. "I have been thinking," Laura said softly, "about what happens when James is old enough to ask questions. About his father, I mean." Kyle was quiet for a moment. "We will tell him the truth in an age-appropriate way, that I am not his biological father, but that I chose him and you, and that makes us just as much a family as any other. We will tell him that his biological father was not ready to be a parent, and that was his loss because James is amazing. You really see him as yours, do not you, completely and totally? When I look at him, I do not think about anyone else. He is my son." Kyle pulled her closer. "Has there been any word from your sister?" Laura sighed. "I got a letter yesterday. She is recovering, but slowly. Her husband lost his job in the mines and they are struggling. I sent them some money. You do not have to ask my permission to help your family, Laura. What is mine is yours." "I know, but it feels strange having access to so much after having so little for so long. You are my wife, my partner in all things. The ranch, the accounts, all of it is as much yours as mine." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, rocking gently, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. "Kyle," Laura said eventually, "I want you to know that I am truly happy. Happier than I ever imagined I could be. You saved my life that day in the snow, but you did so much more than that. You gave me hope. You gave me love. You gave my son a father and a home and a future. I do not know how I will ever repay you." Kyle turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "You have already repaid me 1,000 times over. You brought light and laughter into this house. You made me remember what it is like to look forward to each new day. You gave me a family. I love you, Laura Jameson, more than I can say." "I love you too," Laura whispered. And then he was kissing her, deep and sweet and full of promise. That night, for the first time since James's birth, they truly came together as husband and wife. Kyle was gentle and patient, mindful of her recent ordeal, and Laura felt the last walls around her heart finally crumble. This was not the desperate, foolish passion that had led to James's conception. This was real and honest and built on a foundation of trust and genuine love. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight, Laura felt a peace she had never known. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The summer passed in a blur of happiness. James grew rapidly, becoming more alert and responsive each day. He smiled for the first time in July, a big gummy grin that had Kyle rushing to fetch Laura from the kitchen so she would not miss it. He started cooing and babbling, carrying on long conversations in his baby language that Kyle would answer seriously, as if they were discussing important ranch business. In August, Laura's sister Mary and her husband Tom came to visit for a week. Mary was thin from her illness but recovering, and she cried when she saw Laura, so happy that her sister had found such a good situation. Tom and Kyle got along well, and before they left, Kyle had offered Tom a job as a ranch hand if they wanted to move to Cripple Creek. Tom accepted gratefully, and by September, they had settled into one of the small cottages on the ranch property. Having Mary nearby was wonderful for Laura. The sisters had always been close, and after losing their parents and nearly losing each other, they treasured their time together. Mary would come up to the main house most mornings, and they would do the housework together while James played on a blanket on the floor. In the afternoons, they would sit on the porch with their mending while James napped, talking about everything and nothing. One afternoon in early October, while the aspen trees were turning gold on the mountains, Mary broached a subject that had been on her mind. "Laura, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Are you and Kyle planning to have more children?" "I mean, children that are both of yours biologically?" Laura's hand stilled on the shirt she was mending. "We have talked about it. Kyle says he wants a house full of children, but I worry sometimes that if we have biological children together, he might love them more than James. That James might feel like less of a real son. Have you told Kyle these fears? Not in so many words. You should. From what I have seen, that man adores James. I do not think biology matters one bit to him." That evening, after James was asleep, Laura brought up the subject with Kyle. They were in bed, her head resting on his chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns on her arm. "Can I ask you something?" she began tentatively. "Anything. If we have more children, biological children of yours, will it change how you feel about James?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment, and Laura felt her heart sink, thinking her fears had been confirmed. But then he spoke, and his voice was firm and certain. "Laura, I need you to understand something. The moment I saw James being born, the moment I held him for the first time, he became my son. Not my stepson, not my adopted son, my son. If we have 10 more children, I will love them all equally and completely. James will never be less to me because of his biology. Never. But what if you look at him someday and see his biological father instead of just him?" "I will not, because when I look at James, I see you. I see your courage, your strength, your determination to give him a good life despite impossible odds. And I see myself teaching him to ride, to work the ranch, to be a good man. I see our future, not anyone's past." Laura felt tears pricking her eyes. "I want to give you children, your children. I want James to have brothers and sisters." "Then we will have them," Kyle said softly. "As many as come along, and they will all be ours, every single one of them." As autumn gave way to winter, Laura discovered she was pregnant again. She told Kyle on Christmas morning, wrapping the news in a small box as his gift. When he opened it and found the tiny knitted booties inside, his face transformed with joy. "Really?" he asked, pulling her into his arms. "Really. The baby should come sometime in late June or early July." Kyle kissed her soundly, then knelt down to where James was playing with wooden blocks on the floor. "You hear that, James? You are going to be a big brother." James, now 6 months old, gurgled happily and reached for Kyle's face with chubby hands. This pregnancy was different from Laura's first. She was not alone or afraid or desperate. She had a home, a husband who loved her, and the resources to ensure both she and the baby would be well cared for. She enjoyed being pregnant this time, watching her belly grow with wonder rather than shame. Kyle was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly asking if she was all right, if she needed anything, if she should be resting more. Laura found it endearing even when it was a bit much. James continued to grow and thrive. By the time Laura was visibly pregnant again, he was crawling everywhere and pulling himself up on furniture, always into something. Kyle would chase him around the house in the evenings, both of them laughing, and Laura would watch them with her hands on her growing belly, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude for this life she had somehow fallen into. In April, a man showed up at the ranch asking to speak with Laura. Martha came to find her in the kitchen, her face troubled. "There is a man at the door asking for you," Martha said quietly. "Says his name is Robert Martin." Laura felt the blood drain from her face. The wooden spoon she had been holding clattered to the floor. "No," she whispered. "No, he cannot be here." Kyle, who had just come in from the barn, caught the end of the conversation. His face went hard as stone. "Who is Robert Martin?" "He is James's biological father," Laura said, her voice shaking. "The man who left me when I told him I was pregnant." Kyle's jaw clenched. "Stay here. I will handle this." "Kyle, wait." But he was already striding toward the front door. Laura followed, her heart pounding. At the door stood a man of medium height with sandy hair and weak eyes. He was well dressed but had a shifty look about him that Laura could not believe she had ever missed. "Can I help you?" Kyle asked coldly. "I am here to see Laura Thompson," Robert said. "Laura Jameson," Kyle corrected. "And you can say whatever you need to say to me. I am her husband." Robert's eyes widened. "Husband? I heard you were in the area, Laura, and I came to see you, to explain things." Laura stepped forward, positioning herself slightly behind Kyle. "There is nothing to explain, Robert. You left when I needed you most. You took my money and disappeared." "There is nothing left to say." "I panicked," Robert said. "I was young and stupid and I made a terrible mistake, but I am here now and I want to make things right. I want to be a father to my son." Kyle let out a harsh laugh. "Your son? You have no son. That boy in there is my son. I am the one who has been up with him at night. I am the one who feeds him and changes him and loves him. You are nothing to him." "I have legal rights," Robert said, his voice taking on a whining quality. "I am his biological father." "You gave up any rights you had when you abandoned a pregnant woman with no money and no resources," Kyle said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Now get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing." "Laura," Robert appealed to her directly, "please, I want to be part of his life." Laura looked at this man who had once meant everything to her and felt nothing but contempt. "No, you had your chance and you threw it away. Kyle is James's father in every way that matters. You are just a stranger who shares some blood. Leave, Robert, leave and do not come back." "I will fight this," Robert said, his face reddening. "I will get a lawyer. I will take you to court." "Do it," Kyle said flatly. "I would love to tell a judge about how you abandoned a pregnant woman in the middle of winter, stealing her life savings on your way out. I would love to explain how my wife nearly froze to death because of your cowardice. Go ahead. Take us to court. See how that works out for you." Robert looked between them, clearly realizing he was outmatched. With a final glare, he turned and stalked back to his horse. "This is not over," he called over his shoulder. "Yes, it is," Kyle called back. "It was over the moment you rode away from your responsibilities." They watched until Robert was out of sight, then Kyle turned to Laura, who was shaking. "Are you all right?" he asked, pulling her into his arms. "I never thought I would see him again," she said against his chest. "I do not want him anywhere near James. He will not be. I meant what I said. He has no legal rights to a child he abandoned, and if he tries anything, I have resources and connections he cannot match. James is ours, Laura. No one is taking him from us." That evening, after James was asleep, Kyle sat down and wrote a letter to the best lawyer in Colorado Springs, explaining the situation and asking about the process to legally adopt James. The response came back within a week. Given that Robert had abandoned both mother and child, had taken money that did not belong to him, and had never provided any support, a court would almost certainly terminate any parental rights he might claim and allow Kyle's adoption to proceed. The legal process took several months, But in June of 1893, just weeks before Laura gave birth to their second child, a judge in Cripple Creek signed the papers making Kyle legally and permanently James's father. Kyle had his name officially changed to James Thomas Jameson, and Robert Martin was barred from any contact with the child. Laura cried when Kyle brought the papers home, tears of relief and gratitude. "It is done," Kyle said, gathering her and James, who was now walking and talking in simple sentences, into his arms. "He is officially mine, ours, forever." 2 weeks later, Laura went into labor with their second child. This birth was faster and easier than the first, perhaps because her body knew what to do this time. Kyle stayed by her side again, and on a warm July evening their daughter was born. "A girl," Dr. Harrison announced with a smile. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Kyle looked down at his daughter, red-faced and screaming lustily, and fell in love all over again. "She looks just like you," he told Laura. "You say that about all of them," Laura said with a tired smile, "because it is true." They named her Catherine Ann Jameson after Kyle's mother. James was fascinated by his new sister, constantly wanting to see her and touch her tiny hands. Kyle would lift him up carefully so he could look at her in her cradle, always making sure James understood he had to be gentle. "Baby sissy," James would say proudly, patting Catherine's hand with surprising gentleness for a 1-year-old. "That is right," Kyle would say. "Your baby sister, you are going to be the best big brother." The next few years passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful chaos. Catherine was a colicky baby who did not sleep well, leaving both Kyle and Laura exhausted for months. But she grew into a sweet toddler with Laura's green eyes and Kyle's dark hair, always laughing and getting into mischief. In the spring of 1895, Laura gave birth to another son, whom they named Michael Patrick Jameson after Kyle's grandfather. James, now nearly 3, took his role as big brother seriously, helping to fetch diapers and singing off key lullabies to the baby when he cried. The ranch prospered during these years. Kyle's careful management and hard work paid off, and they expanded their herd significantly. Tom proved to be an excellent ranch hand, and Kyle eventually made him foreman. Mary helped Laura with the children and the household, and the two families became inseparable. In 1897, Laura gave birth to their fourth child, a daughter they named Sarah Rose. And in 1899, their fifth and final child arrived, a boy they named Benjamin Kyle Jameson. By the time Benjamin was born, James was 7 years old, a bright, active boy who loved the ranch and everything about it. He followed Kyle everywhere, learning to ride and rope and handle cattle. Kyle never treated him any differently than the other children, and James had no memory of his biological father. As far as he was concerned, Kyle was his father, period. One evening when James was 9, he came to Kyle with a question that Kyle had been half expecting for years. "Papa," James said, climbing up to sit next to Kyle on the porch swing. "Tommy Jackson at school said I do not look like you. He said his pa told him I am not really yours." Kyle felt his chest tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "What did you say to Tommy?" "I said he was a liar and I pushed him down. Then Miss Anderson made me stay in at recess." Kyle sighed. This was it, the conversation he had been preparing for. "James, come here. I need to tell you something important." James climbed into Kyle's lap, even though he was getting big for it. Kyle wrapped his arms around his son and gathered his thoughts. "You are my son in every way that matters," Kyle began. "I have loved you since before you were even born, but Tommy was right about one thing. I am not your biological father." James looked up at him, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means that before your mama and I met, she knew another man. He was your biological father, which means he is the one who gave you your hair color and your eye color. But he was not ready to be a father, so he left. And that was when your mama and I met, when she was pregnant with you. I chose you, James. I chose to be your father, and I chose to love you, and I would make that choice again every single day for the rest of my life. James was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. So you are not my real papa. I am absolutely your real papa, Kyle said firmly. Being a father is not about biology. It is about who loves you, who takes care of you, who teaches you right from wrong. It is about who sits up with you when you are sick, and who celebrates your successes, and who dries your tears when you are sad. That is what makes someone a real father, and I have been doing those things since the day you were born. Do I have to call him Papa too? The other man? No, you will never have to meet him if you do not want to. He gave up his right to be called your father a long time ago. James thought about this some more, then nodded slowly. Okay, you are my papa, not him. That is right, and nothing will ever change that. Papa? Yes, son, I love you. Kyle felt tears prick his eyes. I love you too, James, more than you will ever know. The conversation happened again in different forms over the years, as James grew older and understood more. But the conclusion was always the same. Kyle was his father, and nothing could change that. As the new century dawned in 1900, Kyle stood on his porch one evening, watching the sun set over his land. Laura came to stand beside him, and he wrapped his arm around her waist. Look at what we built, he said softly. Before them, the ranch sprawled in all its glory. In the yard, all 5 of their children were playing. James, now almost 8, was teaching 6-year-old Catherine how to rope a fence post. 5-year-old Michael was building something with blocks while 3-year-old Sarah watched. And baby Benjamin, just over a year old, was toddling around on unsteady legs, supervised by Martha, who was still with them despite her advancing years. I never imagined my life could be this full, Laura said. That day you found me in the snow, I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing left to live for except the baby I was carrying. And now look at us. 5 children, Kyle said with wonder. 5 beautiful, healthy, amazing children, a successful ranch, a full life. We are blessed, Laura. We are, she agreed. And it all started because you were kind enough to stop for a stranger in the snow. Kyle turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. After all these years, she was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. There were lines around her eyes now and silver threads in her auburn hair, but to him she was perfect. I would stop for you 1,000 times over, he said. I would make the same choice every single time. You and James, you saved me just as much as I saved you. Before you, this ranch was just a place I worked. You made it a home. You made me a husband and a father. You gave me a reason to wake up every morning with joy in my heart. I love you, Laura Jameson, today and always. I love you too, Laura whispered. My hero, my husband, my home. They stood there together as the sun sank below the mountains, watching their children play, listening to their laughter echo across the land. The wind carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the cattle lowing and the horses nickering in the barn. James looked up from teaching Catherine and waved at his parents. Kyle waved back, his heart so full he thought it might burst. This was what life was supposed to be about, not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but small, perfect scenes like this one. Family, love, home. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Kyle and Laura went inside to start getting the children ready for bed. It would be chaos, as it always was with 5 children, but it was the kind of chaos Kyle had learned to treasure. Bath time would involve water everywhere. Story time would involve everyone wanting a different book, and tucking them all in would take the better part of an hour. But finally, when all 5 children were asleep in their beds, Kyle and Laura retreated to their own room. They got ready for bed in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that came from years of partnership and understanding. "Kyle," Laura said as they settled under the covers, "do you remember what you said to me that first night, when I was recovering from nearly freezing?" "I said a lot of things that night. You said I would raise my baby in your home. That was what you promised me. And you kept that promise, but you gave me so much more. You gave me love and more children and a life beyond anything I could have imagined." Kyle pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "You gave me just as much. You gave me everything that matters. We made something good, did we not? Out of something that started so desperately." "We made something wonderful," Kyle agreed. "And the best part is, it is not over yet. We have so many more years ahead of us. So many more sunsets to watch. So many more moments with our children. So many more quiet evenings like this one." Laura snuggled closer to him, her hand resting over his heart. "I cannot wait to see what comes next." "Neither can I," Kyle whispered. "Neither can I." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges the future might bring, they would face them together. The ranch was quiet except for the usual night sounds. An owl hooted in the distance. A horse stamped in the barn. And in the children's rooms, 5 heartbeats marked the rhythm of the family they had built together. Years continued to pass in the way they do when life is good, sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly, but always forward. James grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch. He never questioned his place in the family, never felt less than his siblings. Kyle had made sure of that. When James was 18, he met a girl in town, a sweet-tempered young woman named Elizabeth who worked in her father's general store. Kyle watched his eldest son fall in love and remembered his own journey to love, how it had started with an act of mercy in a snowstorm and had grown into something neither he nor Laura could have anticipated. At James's wedding in the fall of 1910, Kyle stood to give a toast. He looked at his son, so handsome in his best suit, standing beside his new bride, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. "My son," Kyle said, and the words came out rougher than he intended. "I have watched you grow from an infant into the man you are today, and I could not be more proud. You are kind, hardworking, honest, and true. You got those qualities from your mother, who is the finest woman I have ever known. As you start this new chapter of your life with Elizabeth, I want you to remember one thing. Family is not always about blood. It is about choice. It is about choosing to love, choosing to commit, choosing to stand by each other no matter what challenges come your way. You were the first lesson I learned in that truth, and you have never once disappointed me. I love you, James. I am honored to be your father." There was not a dry eye in the room when Kyle sat down. Laura squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face, and James crossed the room to embrace his father, whispering, "Thank you, Papa," in his ear. Catherine married 2 years later, and Michael the year after that. Sarah and Benjamin were still at home, growing up fast, and Kyle sometimes found himself wishing he could slow down time. But he and Laura were getting older too. His back ached more than it used to, and Laura had more gray in her hair than auburn now. But they were still strong, still healthy, still deeply in love. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1913, Kyle took Laura back to the spot where he had found her in the snow all those years ago. The seasons had changed, and it was a warm spring day instead of the bitter winter of their first meeting, but he wanted to show her. "This is where I saw you," he said, pointing to a spot near a large boulder. "You were right there, covered in snow, barely alive. And I remember thinking I could not let you die. I could not just ride past. Laura looked at the spot, then back at her husband. That was the day my real life began, she said softly. Everything before that was just prologue. Mine too, Kyle admitted. I did not know it then, but I was waiting for you. This ranch, this life, it was all just waiting for you to arrive and make it real. They stood there for a long time, hand in hand, remembering that desperate day and all the beautiful days that had come after it. Then Kyle led her back to their horses and they rode home together, just as they had done countless times before and would do countless times again. In 1915, James and Elizabeth gave them their first grandchild, a boy they named Kyle Jameson. Holding his grandson for the first time, Kyle felt the circle complete itself in a way he had not expected. Here was the continuation of the family he and Laura had built, a family that had started with an act of compassion in a snowstorm and had grown into something magnificent. "You did good, Papa," James said, watching his father with his newborn son. "You taught me what it means to be a father. Now I get to pass those lessons on to him." Kyle looked up at his oldest son, this man he had chosen to love before he was even born, and felt pride swell in his chest. "You are going to be wonderful at this. Just love him, James. That is the secret to everything." Over the next few years, more grandchildren came. Catherine had twins, a boy and a girl. Michael had a daughter. Each one was precious, each one a blessing, each one another thread in the tapestry of family they had woven. In 1920, on a cool autumn evening, Kyle and Laura sat on their porch swing as they had done thousands of times before. All 5 of their children had come for Sunday dinner, bringing their spouses and children with them. The house had been full of noise and laughter and chaos, and it had been perfect. Now, as the evening settled in and their family headed to their respective homes, Kyle and Laura enjoyed the quiet. "We have 7 grandchildren now," Laura marveled. 7. "Can you believe it?" "Barely," Kyle admitted. "It seems like just yesterday I was teaching James to ride, and now he has 3 children of his own." "We are getting old," Laura said, but she was smiling. "We are getting lucky," Kyle corrected. "Not everyone gets to grow old with the person they love, surrounded by the family they built together." Laura rested her head on his shoulder. "I think about that day sometimes. The day you found me. What if you had taken a different road? What if you had not looked to the right at just that moment? What if you had decided I was not worth the trouble? I would have missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me," Kyle said simply. "Finding you in that snow was not random chance, Laura. It was fate. It was meant to be. We were meant to be." "Do you ever wonder what happened to him? To Robert?" Kyle considered this. "Sometimes, but only in an abstract way. He made his choice 28 years ago and we made ours. He does not get to be part of this story. James never asks about him anymore. Because he knows who his father is. Biology does not matter when love does the real work of raising a child." They rocked gently, watching the stars come out one by one. In the distance, they could hear a coyote howling and the answering bark of one of the ranch dogs. The mountains stood dark against the night sky, eternal and unchanging, witnesses to all the human drama that unfolded in their shadow. "Kyle," Laura said softly, "thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For stopping that day, for offering me a home, for loving James when no one else would. For making me your wife, for giving me 4 more beautiful children, for every sunrise we have watched together and every sunset we will watch in the future, for building this life with me. Just thank you." Kyle kissed the top of her head, his heart full. "The pleasure has been all mine, Mrs. Jameson. All mine." They sat there until the chill of the evening drove them inside, where they banked the fire and climbed the stairs to the bedroom they had shared for nearly 3 decades. As they settled into bed, Laura curled into her customary spot against Kyle's side, and he wrapped his arm around her. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," he whispered back. "Today and always." And there, in the house they had filled with love and laughter, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, Kyle and Laura drifted off to sleep. The ranch was quiet now, everyone asleep, but it was a peaceful quiet, the kind that speaks of contentment and home and family. The story that had begun with a desperate woman freezing in the snow and a cowboy who chose to stop had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. 5 children, 7 grandchildren and counting, a successful ranch, and a love that had withstood every test time could throw at it. Kyle had told Laura she would raise her baby in his home, and she had. But she had done so much more than that. She had turned his house into a home, his solitary existence into a full and joyful life, and his heart into something capable of holding more love than he had ever thought possible. And as the years continued to unfold, as more grandchildren came, and the ranch passed from one generation to the next, the story of how it all began became family legend. The children and grandchildren would ask to hear it again and again. The tale of how Grandpa Kyle found Grandma Laura in the snow, how he offered her a home, how love grew from an act of simple human kindness. James, in particular, loved to tell the story to his own children, emphasizing how his father had chosen him, had loved him, had made him a Jameson in every way that mattered. And his children would grow up understanding that family was about more than blood, that love was a choice you made every day, and that the smallest act of kindness could change the course of a life. Kyle and Laura would live to see their 50th wedding anniversary in 1943, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. They would grow old together on that ranch in the Colorado mountains, their love never diminishing, only deepening with each passing year. And when they finally passed, within months of each other as couples who have truly been one often do, they left behind a legacy that had nothing to do with land or money or possessions. They left behind a family built on love, on choice, on the fundamental belief that everyone deserves compassion and second chances. The ranch would stay in the family for generations, each successive Jameson adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Kyle and Laura had built. And always, the story would be told of how it all began on a frozen day in 1892, when a cowboy found a pregnant woman in the snow and said 4 simple words that changed everything. "You will raise that baby in my home." Those words had been more than an offer of shelter. They had been a promise of protection, of acceptance, of unconditional love. And Kyle had kept that promise every single day for the rest of his life. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the grand gestures or the dramatic moments, but the daily choice to love, to commit, to show up for the people who needed you most. Kyle and Laura had both learned that lesson in their own ways, and they had passed it down through the generations. Their story was proof that sometimes the worst moment of your life can lead to the best thing that ever happened to you. That sometimes getting lost in a snowstorm leads you exactly where you need to be. That sometimes the person who saves you ends up being saved right back. And most importantly, their story proved that love, real love, is not about biology or blood or even romance. It is about seeing someone who needs help and choosing to be the one who helps. It is about looking at a child who is not yours and choosing to make them yours anyway. It is about commitment and compassion, and showing up every single day to do the hard work of building a life together. Kyle and Laura had done that work, had built that life, and in doing so had created something beautiful and lasting. Their love story was not one of love at first sight or grand romantic gestures. It was better than that. It was real and messy and complicated and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. And it had all started with a cowboy who chose to stop in the middle of a blizzard for a stranger who needed help. That single choice, that one moment of compassion, had rippled out across decades and generations, creating a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. In the end, that is what love really is. A choice you make every day to put someone else's needs alongside your own. To build something together that is bigger than either of you alone. To create a home where everyone belongs and everyone is valued and everyone is loved exactly as they are. Kyle and Laura had done that. They had taken a moment of desperation and transformed it into a lifetime of joy. They had taken a child who was not theirs and made him theirs completely. They had taken a chance on love and found that love always returns what you invest in it, multiplied beyond measure. Their story was complete, their circle closed, their legacy secure. And somewhere in heaven, if such a place exists, Kyle and Laura were together still, watching over the family they had built, proud of what they had created, grateful for the day a snowstorm brought them together and love kept them that way forever. The end.